Morning, Sanjay.
Good morning, Eduardo. How's it going?
It's going great. We're here. Thank you for meeting me. Thanksgiving Day. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving. So today we are here to talk about the water lobby, right? That's the name you came up with for this podcast, water lobby. Tell me more about what you see water lobby being discussing in future episodes and what we're going to talk about in today's episode.
Thank you. So this is the pilot episode of the Water Lobby podcast, and this idea was borrowed from the architecture discipline. I work in Texas, which is a state in America, and America has a long history of city sprawling community networks of cities in North America. And what the water lobby tries to mimic is to set the groundwork for a conversation that is very central to my state of Texas because we live in a very arid state with a vast sources. So what the water lobby tries to grab, what we try to centralize, and my idea is to coalesce the conversation around natural resource conservation. We have, I think, a responsibility towards natural resource conservation, and I just wanted to start opening the dialogue. And Sanjay, I want to thank you helping me. I'm interested what brings you to this work and how are you?
Yeah, it's like you described water lobby and really, resounded with that name itself. It's powerful. It also, I think, brings people together. Like lobby, it has space for everyone to come in and about water and water as a serious topic as well, because there's like to it where elected representatives, I guess, they need to like us like we are a force. We are becoming organized, a water community where we can have a say and have a voice so that water is considered a bigger factor in the legislature, especially here in Texas. It's already pretty serious in Texas, but I think we need to do much more bigger work in water lobbying for our community that we have for water. And with that, we're going to talk about HECRAS, right? The HECRAS 2025, the new release. But before we jump into that, I want to ask you, Eduardo, like, tell me about your background, where do you work right now? How long have you worked here? And when did you first started using HECRAS?
Well, the HECRAS topic for today is related to some of the work I do for the city of Austin. I generally try to keep our kind of separate from the professional work, but my background is in engineering and in civil construction. I stumbled into this career path through academia as a young child. I just gravitated towards the natural sciences. And I just learned somewhere that water is like this renewable resource that can get dirty and we can clean it. So I always thought we just clean all the water. It's like a little silly nut. So that was the root of my interest. And it's still kind of curiosity, my intellectual curiosity. I'm like, why is there dirty water? Why are people thirsty when there's a bunch of dirty water and you can just clean it? And I think that I've been working, I don't work with like water treatment. I don't deal with sanitary sewer management. My professional work deals in storm drain planning, storm drain analysis, storm drain, almost like I would say storm drain protection that people are not. So part of the protection is connecting to their own environment.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the easiest way to do my work is to allow people to see and not to like. So that's where this podcast format comes in for the water lobby is that sometimes I believe, and my background is also a Mexican American. It's in my culture and my tradition, like my native indigenous upbringing, the way I get things done. And so I have my culture as an oral history. And the reason why it's an oral history is because it just works better than like
Yeah.
it just works better than manuscripts. Oral history is the way that I've been inculcated to teach, the way I've been inculcated to learn is through the use of words. So that's kind of my background, the way I learn and the way I am coming into this conversation, Sanjay, about water is to just talk about water and it'll just work out if I'm super smart about it. And this brings us to HICRAS. But Sanjay, I'm curious about your background as well and how do we meet to the subject, which I think is very important.
So, for me, I work as a consultant here in Austin, and I graduated from Texas A&M, the opposite college. So Eduardo, you graduated from UT Austin. I did from Texas A&M. We're
Yes,
kind
I
of in the sense, and we're also playing this week over the weekend but the rivalry is coming back, and it's in College Station. So we'll talk about that later. But I started using HECRAS when I was in India and I was in my undergrad college and I wanted to apply for American University and I wanted to gain the skills that Americans had. I wanted to like in the same software environment that I would be working in my grad school. And that's when I up and I found HECRAS and I was like, okay, this is a free software. This is crazy. I can just download it and it has like this example exercises built in. It has all these like community behind it. If there's YouTube videos about it, I could watch it. And that's like 7 years ago or 8 years ago when it was a very young thing and there was many tutorials about everything. But HECRAS, had this community of tutorials and then I came to grad school and learned from one of the best professors, Dr. Verbs, about, he's had a career at US Army Corps of Engineers, and he was like one of the few people that were able to teach HECRAS from the basics, where show you how each equation really works and how it translates into the software. So that's kind of how I started, and then I through internships and then career at various firms, I was able to use HECRAS, mostly HECRAS 2D and HECRAS 1D for a while, and build these flood products, which are being used all across US. A bunch of reports on flood studies where are being litigated, so I shouldn't talk too much about them. But yeah, so that's kind of my background on HECRAS and where I can come from. What else, Eduardo? Tell me about like engineering expertise in HECRAS and how long have you worked on this software?
yes, I forgot to touch on some of them. So in 2013, I graduated the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. Um, with a civil engineering degree, at that point, I was exposed to a few of the free softwares produced by the Hydraulic Engineering Center, which is a like of the Army Corps of Engineers, which is military engineering industrial complex. We can talk about that some other time. But yes, I was introduced to HECRAS, HMS, to HYA, to Pipe 2000. I was a professor by the name of Dr. John King. And that was like homework was to produce some like very simple in each of the various softwares just so that we were exposed that professionals use for computation. And I've always been in love with number theory and in chaos theory. I know since Smith began to about it. The way I took those experiences into my profession for the city, I was in AIT, an engineering training. And I was tasked with computing water surface elevations near people's houses. That and way you go about that is you get a flood risk map produced by Fed Emergency Management Administration of the United States of America. And so they have this tax product that's rooted in a hydraulic computation product, which is rooted in a survey kind of data set that someone went out there and did staking operation. As exposed to the nexus of like engineering, computer computation, simulation software, and also like some library of just stuff out there in the real world that's informed by like hydrologic data. Like all that is stored in the RAS model. And so this is kind of experience is just based on dealing directly with the product, dealing directly with this is a HEC-RAS model. This is why we use it. This is the people that pay for flood insurance. That's why. The people that have a job, that's what they're doing. The people that are like in stuff and doing presentations, that's what they have to defend. Like I said, go to litigation. And that I've learned it is, I guess, by being there, by just working within that nexus of like, did you interpret this model to compute this, to that? What does that mean? So by being kind of the modeling library and being a really good gatekeeper, because I would learn about it, I would read the reports, I would make sure that the numbers make sense, I would ask questions, I would document my questions, and then I would try to implement my knowledge into other areas and see if it was consistent. It's like you said earlier, Sanjay, and like I've experienced too, there's a lot of computational frameworks we can use to compute our interested values, whether it be water surface elevations, whether it be flow rate, whether it be velocity, fluid erosion stuff. It's just being in that nexus and working hard at it as questions. And also understanding it's a serious endeavor.
You recently started using the newer version, newer release, which is still in beta mode. It's called HECRAS 2025. And you
A
can,
big
get your city job and you are this thing online, which is HECRAS 2025. I guess not many people at your job currently are talking about it. At least in my job, we're still, enough about it. But you saw it and about the documents, you started learning about it. So why does it matter, this new thing? Why does it matter for Austin? Why does it matter for all the people that you work for, all the projects that how does HECRAS 2025 really matter?
I think the simulation work I'm familiar with, simulation that I'm familiar with, is very powerful. I think when you have a model that makes sense to people, then you can show them with a visual graphical interface. Look at the water, it's collecting right here. Look at the water, it's like spinning around the house. Look at the velocity grade being computed. Well, we'll put this block here. We'll put this bunch of rock here, material composition or design. That's a very powerful tool. So that what HECRAS is a very powerful tool to simulate design conditions, existing conditions, taxation conditions, historical conditions. And so this tool is really a physics engine.
Yeah.
It's a physics engine that can help us answer questions to people's livelihoods and people's investment opportunities. The development of an urban city uh, is predicated on the safety of operations. And what I think Everest does, it helps you see risk conditions of the natural environment. And so it's like a video game that has only become better by adding components that were previously only accessible through the private market.
Yeah.
And so the private market used to have an advantage in simulation of at-risk conditions because of this unsolved problem for the Army Corps of Engineers of pipe flow. For some reason or another, they didn't have a pipe flow system that
Yeah.
would have tools at the urban level. But with the pipe tools that it has, no problems we can solve for free is much greater. And then I'm hopeful that be fluent in this new realm of computational capabilities.
Yeah.
It's something to be proud of. It's something that will teach generations to talk about fluids, to talk about type, not just flood risk, but like snow Borealis effect. It's really a physics engine that our army complex has produced, and it's incredibly powerful to help protect our communities, like and protect our investments.
Yeah, and pipe component that has been introduced into the software, it's kind of very unique. And I don't know if everyone understands this, where like HECRAS this feature for almost like multiple of its existence, where you could simply put a pipe into the model, which sounds, I mean, ways around it, which as used to use those ways, but it wasn't like very, or it wasn't built in where that's the core of, and now it is there. So previously, all the rural areas in United States have been modeled with, the B engineering program. It modeled the entire continent, at least the region six, which is the southern states, have been modeled to a very high degree of like availability, I would say, of data. But all those models that were built, and it's of money that was spent on making these models for multiple states, it's mostly just accurate for the rural areas where you don't have that many pipes. You have a lot of overland flow. You have these streams and canals and ditches which carry this flow. But for Austin, which are centers, not just the United States, you've had this issue where you just weren't able to accurately model all the stormwater assets.
It's an education opportunity. That's how I see it. But we're nearing the end of the discussion. Sanjay, I was kind of curious how you see this discussion developing and how can we engage with the community from your perspective?
I think from my perspective, first, this podcast, which is the water lobby, we're going to keep having discussions around this topic, topics that are relevant to people who are not just water engineers, but people who worry about water, they worry about our streams, they worry about the availability of water in the future. And I think the audience, it's not just people who are always engaged and tuned into this water engineering field, but people who are in other countries, other cities, states, people who want to learn about something and something specific to water, which where I was many years ago, where I just was figuring out my career path and I did not have any person to listen to who was pursuing it as a career. So it's one of those things where a lot of people want to learn. I think the this is the golden age of intellectualism, right? Everyone can have access to information, and specifically people who live in, places around Austin, our southern border, where water is going to be a bigger and bigger issue in the future, right? We think are on a path where it's going to escalate into a conflict. It's already a big conflict. TCQ has been working on it for a while in Texas. They are one of the stakeholders for water availability here. We have, a lot of water agencies in Texas. So as we approach that timeline where everything is a conflict, I think we need to be able to talk about things so that only by talking about things we can reduce the conflict and we can prevent further escalation. And HECRAS is very much at the center of it because this is where it starts, right? This is where we start modeling the flood or we start modeling and then just as a process, right? Of course, it starts at the legislature where they want to start, worrying about the risk of flood, or starts at the insurance companies, and then we come in as engineers and stake consultants or the city where we do the actual work. But then there's this timeline of like multiple decades where our work gets talked about in the public, in media, and I think that's where I'm kind of leading with it. What do you think?
I think that it's a very humbling recognition, and it's important to remember that yes, water, although it's a ubiquitous element, is you only have the water that's around you. And so I think the topic for today is helping us revitalize that recognition that water is everywhere, yes, but the only water that's relevant is the water that is available to you. And with this podcast, I hope to just continue the conversation to be, like you said, signal to other people that there's a lot of people that care about this around. This is so many things that you said are so humbling. This is the age of intellectual because it usually lies spread faster because truth is just so hard to distinguish from experience. And to me, it's a very philosophical subject of water. But it's a very complicated subject, and that's what makes it so I'm so inclined to engage with it because my ancestors, and I just go back to this tradition, my ancestors, all they care about is water. So as far as what am I doing here? I don't know what else I could be doing. I don't have any other traditional education other than take care of the stuff that's important as a resource. But it's also an element that produces a strong economic activity for engineers, for scientists, for recreation specialists, for resource managers, for like Fiesta, Texas. It's surrounded by an ecosystem that is resilient due to the water availability of that area or through the water use. And so the way that we use water is economically relevant. It's economically stabilizing that we have water. And it's important to educate because as there are relationships with the power complex of politics, of it's like just local politics, but federal politics. But there's also a relationship to younger people as well. So we can look into the future by the pure geometry of the future, the physics of the future. We're going to have a terrible burning ecology. We will reach, faster than people anticipate these extreme temperature ranges. But we are in this Anthropocene, which as much as it's nightmarish, it also provides us these incredible tools for preparing us. And so I'm engaging with this podcast with the whole complexity of caring and passion and dialogue that I hope will strengthen us through this crazy world that we're living in at the moment, because it's crazy out there. But if you have the tools that we're trying to provide, you can probably give us a cohesive community. I do believe I do work in a city, but we protect the rural areas. And so where this dynamic comes from is that I do live in an urban area, which is the economic powerhouse of a country are the urban areas, but the communities of the country are in the rural locations. And so I'm just trying to connect to
That's a very interesting thing that you brought up, where not many things impact your neighbors as much as water does, right? For example,
absolutely.
you can build a road or a highway or a bridge anywhere, and it's mostly going to, increase the traffic in your area, and it will normalize, a further 100 miles downstream. It will, but water, it's so different. Where if you're working for a city which is Austin, and you're able to put more water into the stream, which is the Colorado River, by various things like more industrialization or just change in land use. It's going to impact people who live downstream, all these rural communities which are on Colorado River. It directly impacts them, right? And it not just impacts them, it impacts every single city that falls on the Colorado River of many thousand miles downstream. So it's very interesting how water just is this complex topic, and just touching on politics. It's not just your local city that you have to worry about. It's the aquifer authority you have to worry about. It's the river authority. It could be an environmental consulting or environmental nonprofit NGO who wants to provide stewardship to the environment. And so there are so many moving parts every single day that it's just really hard to just absorb all of it. But we try our best as professionals, right?
I think you said it very well about providing mentorship guidance to newer practitioners of natural resource conservation. Because the water lobby does try to develop of natural conservation, not just of water. There's this intermingleness with the Soil Conservation Service,
Yeah.
which is water and soil are they're part of the same system. If what makes soil separate from just dirt and is the fact that there is a carbon cycle happening. There's a water cycle happening through that carbon cycle. And so it's important to engage in fruitful dialogue that's related to physical reality. And as scientists, as academics, and I think as really disciples, Western or Eastern education, just education in general, like mathematics education, it's important for people to understand that we have tools like HECRA. We have education systems that talk about geometry, that talk about algebra. Like these words aren't even English. These words are from somewhere else. So it's important to understand the cultural milieu in which we exist, how interdisciplinary it is, but the more interdisciplinary it is, the more chaotic it is. So for you and I working in this very chaotic realm of activism, public participation, of scientific production, it's important to have people in discussions that help provide critical thinking to our community if we expect them to deal with the challenges that we're trying to deal with, that we're just trying to tell people about sometimes. So I think this podcast is a good stem cell of discussion. That's how I see it, and I'm learning a lot from you. Sanjay.
It's same, just learning through this process. I think that that's one of the more important things, right, for everyone, just learning continuously. And
Where can people find our discussions, Sanjay? And
yeah,
where can they find us next month? Oh,
so we're going to post it on YouTube, right? And then we'll try to make it available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, or Apple Podcast. And we'll also try to write a blog about it. Um, and I think once it's available and once we get some people listen in, then we'll take the feedback and see how it's going to develop from there. But I think it's going to be a really good discussion. And as we keep doing it more, we can touch on each of these areas or stakeholders or knowledge that you need to be a water expert or in more detail, right? Because it's you touched on the mathematic component of it. You need to be having a strong math background, which all STEM, and then there's a strong computer science background to it as well. And then you have a strong language, so you need to be really good at writing reports, right? And you need to be a per good person who can like talk to people about it. So there's just everything you taught in school will not be used in your life. When we're in school, we're like, hey, social science, what am I going to use it for? Why am I studying this? Or you're looking at a different language. If you're a bilingual student and you're learning Spanish or Mandarin in school, and then you're like, why am I learning this? I think that kind of all, once you hit your 30s, everything makes sense why you learn all those things in your life, in school and in college. Even being able to uh, operate a YouTube account or the simple things. I think everything really, really matters when it comes to water. Every single skill counts.
yes, this is practice. When I used to go to college and I used to study for these tests about stuff, the way that I remember was talking about it, that I really talked about it, just by caring about it. And so keeping that on fire has been a strong factor in the way I enter these conversations. But thank you, Sanjay, and
Thanks.
we will put out our pilot episode and reach out.
Thanks, Edward. You have a good day.
Thank you, Sanjay, and
Happy Thanksgiving.